to a keynote speech by Dr. Ishad Hussain with reference to simpler tax systems enabling higher growth in TaxNet, fourth largest private bank in the country with approximately 1,250 branches and around 1,280 ATMs across Pakistan, with a balance sheet exceeding 1 trillion rupees and equity exceeding 100 billion rupees. This year, Alhamdulillah, we also got the Bankers Award, which is the most prestigious award in the industry. The main topic today is about simplification of tax systems. If we look at the global perspective, there is a big shift towards simplification of tax systems, reduction of tax rates, and reduction in tax compliance cost as well. But unfortunately, when we look at Pakistan, there is still a lot of room for improvement. Pakistan is ranked 147 out of 190 countries in ease of doing business in tax, and in tax compliance index, we are ranked 172 out of 190 countries. And another alarming trend is that 1.8 million tax filers submitted their returns in 2007. Unfortunately, this number has gone down to 1.1 million in 2017. So instead of increasing the tax net, it is showing, unfortunately, a declining trend. So we need to really focus on this critical issue, that why is this happening in the country, and unless we make significant efforts towards addressing this issue, the economic growth will not really flourish. Now I would like to invite Mr. Tahir Hassan Qureshi, CEO of Lightbank, to say a few words on the topic and discussion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum once again, and I, on behalf of Lightbank, welcome to all the distinguished guests and participants of this public awareness seminar. Especially thankful to former Governor Dr. Ishfaq Tola Sahab, representing Tax Committee of Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. And we were just waiting for the chairman FBR and FCCB. That's why the function has started a bit delayed. Hopefully they would join us. People of ABL are, I think, sitting there, just to, requesting them to please join us in this noble cause. Farhan has introduced the Allied Bank, and I would like to add certain corporate social responsibility elements of the board of directors and the management, and also the ABL's preparation for the transformation into digital banking. The bank is fully geared to adapt to the changing banking dynamics in the digital age, to offer branchless banking, payment services, digital transactions, and would continue to contribute towards the growth of Pakistan. Honorable keynote speaker, Dr. Saab, Allied Bank, being cognizant of its corporate social responsibility, firmly believes in playing a constructive part in nation building. As part of this initiative, Allied Bank is playing its due role of improving financial literacy across the country. The bank conducts regular seminars for the obligors and customer, focusing on enhancing management skills, tax literacy, corporate governance, including succession planning. And Dr. Saab has very kindly contributed towards this noble cause of ABL. Many times he associated with us and remained the keynote speakers on different sessions we have conducted across the country. As we are fully aware that more than 80% of population is not availing any financial banking services, especially a significant number of small and medium businesses get funding requirements through highly unviable and expensive informal channels, including private money lenders, RTs, supplier credits, etc., instead of availing cheaper formal credit from financial institutions, thereby significantly limiting their escalation in operating size. And also, there are negligible examples of large multinational companies originating from Pakistan. It is sad to note that Pakistan's private sector credit to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world, which is hovering around 15%, whereas in developed countries it is over 100%. The advanced economies are gradually transitioning towards virtual currencies platforms like Bitcoin, blockchains, and in most of the European economies, the analysts are referring to the governments to regulate this new currency system for the taxation laws as well. On the contrary, Pakistan's currency in circulation has increased to an alarming level of 4.1 trillion in November last year, compared to 2.6 trillion in June 2015, clearly indicating preferences for a cash-based economy. It is imperative for the audience to understand that potential obligors, particularly in SME sector, avoid formal credit primarily because of trust deficit, complex tax regime and high tax rates, and above all lack of financial literacy. There are around 47 different taxes, multiple revenue bodies, lengthy and complex post-filing procedures. All these not only increase cost of doing business significantly, but are also counterproductive to the country's economic growth. To successfully implement national financial inclusion strategy and increase in credit to GDP ratio, key enablers, what we at ABL think are financial payments and information and communication technology infrastructure is the most key enabler. In this regard, Ministry of Information Technology to work in close coordination with State Bank of Pakistan and Federal Board of Revenue. And the second key enabler is financial literacy. Ministry of Education to play its role in financial literacy in addition to combined efforts of State Bank of Pakistan and banks. Transaction cost is also very important if we talk about financial inclusion strategy. NADRA has to further reduce the tariff for biometric verification. And the simpler, fair and robust taxation system can surely lead towards encouraging financial inclusion, enhancing documentation, boosting up the tax revenues and fortifying economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Ishaq Saab as keynote speaker, who would enlighten us in detail on the role of simpler taxation system. Dr. Saab, please. Thank you.
Mr. Tahir Qureshi, members of the senior management team of Allied Bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely delighted to be here this morning and talk to you about a topic which is very much uppermost in everybody's mind. What I bring to you is not looking at the tax from either a business perspective or from individuals' perspective or from the government's perspective, but to look at it in the larger economic perspective. And I think that is what I would like to spend next few minutes talking about it. So let's look at the larger picture. Who is eligible for paying taxes? And we're not talking about indirect taxes, which you pay when you buy a product or a service, which is indirect tax. In developing countries, the ratio of the direct taxation to the indirect is very low, and what we have to do is to increase this particular ratio. Pakistan has a labor force of about 80 million, out of which 18 to 19 million people are not participating in the labor force. We do not know what they are doing, whether they are seniors, whether they are handicapped, or whether they are dependent on their families. They're not engaged in active economic activity. 5 to 6 million are unemployed. And I'm not talking of underemployed, I'm talking of open unemployed. and 55 million are employed. So that's the starting point of 55 million. But out of this, the rural labor force accounts for approximately 70% of the total labor force. And this takes you to the land holdings. Most of the land holdings in Pakistan are small, less than 12.5 acres of non-irrigated and 25 acres of irrigated. So this labor force, excepting the people who are above 100 acres, are not actually in the threshold limits of the income tax. They are subsistence farmers, they are haris, casual workers, unpaid family laborers, and landless peasants. So they are not actually covered under the tax. So the main burden lies on the urban incomes, which are earned by 30% of the labor force. So out of 55, you have 30%, which would be close to 15 and 16 million. But out of this 55 million, 2/3 are in informal labor force. Only 25% are in the formal labor force, which means that they are working in the organized sector. So we are left with 4.5 million people who are potential income tax payers in this country. And out of this, we have filers who are about 1.5, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but let's say 1.5. So you have 3 million potential filers who are not paying any taxes. And even among the filers, there are a large number who are nil filers, who do not pay any tax at all. So look at the capacity of the taxation in compared to the realization. In Pakistan, only 0.7% of the population, or 33% of taxable Pakistanis, are filing tax returns, as compared to 4.7% of the population in India. And our per capita incomes are almost the same. Our labor force is almost the same. They have also a large rural labor force, and we also have. So you can see, both from the potential and also compared to our next door neighbor, that there is so much to be realized. Now only 1% or less than 1% of GDP is collected as the direct income tax. If we take out the withholding taxes on a large number of incomes, and today the income which is withheld constitutes about 66% of the total direct tax collection. It used to be 19% or 20% in 2001-2002. So what we have done is that we have gone away from direct taxation to indirect taxation on incomes. And I'll come to the question of the presumptive tax, which is distorting and giving a leeway to a lot of people who should be paying this, which is the fixed tax regime, FTR as it is called. Now, you may ask me, who are these people who are paying the direct income tax, which is less than 1% of GDP? And if I ask anybody, the popular answer would be, it is the salaried workers who are paying the tax because it is deducted at the source. Ladies and gentlemen, you will be surprised that only 3% of the entire direct tax collection accrues from the salary workers. 62% is paid by the corporate sector, and 35% is paid by unincorporated businesses, which are association of persons, individual businesses, partnerships, private limited companies, private unlimited companies, all those pay 35. Now, 118,000 firms are registered in the sales tax system, but only 15,000 actually pay any tax. And 82% of the sales tax is paid by only 100 companies. So the remaining companies which are filing the returns are paying only 18%. So you can see how much scope and gap there is. Now, what is the purpose of a tax policy? Let me start with a basic premise. In a developing country, the major objective of a tax policy is to increase the incomes of the households and firms to save and invest in productive activities that would promote growth and create jobs. That is the objective of a tax policy. There are other objectives that will come in, but what is the results? On the sectoral incidence show that industry, which should have been given these incentives to save, invest, and grow, bears almost 2/3 of the entire tax burden. The share of the industry in the whole national income is only 21%, but 66% of the entire tax burden is borne by the industry. Now, industry, both small scale as well as large scale, is a major employer, is a job creator. So the effective tax rate on the industry today is 41%, while the services sector pays only 21% and agriculture pays 3%. So we are actually not achieving the objective of the tax policy, which is to save and invest in productive activities, because the income after taxation left with the industry is not enough for them to make any savings and to make any investment. And that, I think, is something we have to worry about. But even in the industry, you have commercial importers which have a distinct tax advantage over industrial importers because of the differential tax regime which favors the commercial importers. In 2000-2001, only 20% of custom duties were collected in form of withholding tax. But by 2010 and 11, it is as high as 66%. So the commercial importers have only 4 to 6% to pay as their final settlement of the tax liability, while industrial importer has to pay the whole import duty as well as the sales tax and the income on the corporate profits. So if you have this level playing field which is uneven, your imports will increase, which really pleases the tax collectors, because the higher is the volume of imports, the higher is the collection on custom duties and sales tax. And that means their targets are achieved. So there is this conflict of interest between the tax collector and the national economic objective, where imports create a stress on the balance of payments of the country, where we have to go and borrow in order to meet that gap, but at the same time, it is a positive point as far as the FBR is concerned, because their revenue collection really goes up. So I'm just trying to make you aware that life is not very simple, as a lot of experts tell you, or do this, and you have to weigh the pros and the cons of each one of these items. Now, I'm not talking about under-invoicing, which is also very rampant among the commercial importers. China shows a certain amount of 20 billion of goods which have gone out of China. But Pakistani custom authorities show the value of the same goods which have entered Pakistan as only 16 billion. So you have a gap of 4 billion, which is because of the under-invoicing. When you have under-invoicing, that means that the formal sector is unable to compete with those who are bringing in commercial imports. So industrialization in this country is suffering because of both the FDR, which is a fixed tax regime, as well as a rampant under-invoicing. Now, because of this, the frequently asked question is, why don't we tax agriculture? That's a very common question. It's 20% of our GDP. Why don't we tax that so that we reduce the burden on industry? 90% of the families or the farms are subsistence holdings in agriculture. Of the remaining 1/3 holding more than 50 acres of land would reach the threshold of the taxable income. So to expect that agriculture sector, which is 20% of our GDP, to make an equiproportional contribution to national tax revenue is unrealistic. All calculations show that the yields from farm income are unlikely to exceed 1 to 2% of the current tax revenue collection in aggregate. So we should not pin our hopes. But if you allow or insist that the agriculturists who are in the tax bracket should file their returns, the leakage of the non-agriculture income, which is taking place by declaring this or showing this as agricultural income, will be arrested. So you will get a lot of tax revenues on the non-agriculture income because people are taking agricultural income as a shelter. But if you ask them to file that, then that tendency will be reduced. Now in the services sector, there are two subsectors which are quite active. One is the transportation, and the other is the wholesale and retail trade. Now, because the wholesale and retail trade is growing very rapidly, they are now equal to that of the or actually higher than the contribution of manufacturing. But out of 1.5 million wholesale and retail trade units, which employ 9 million people, only 0.5% of the federal taxes are coming from the wholesale and retail trade. And you tell me, If you go to Liberty Market in Lahore, Tariq Road in Karachi, or the Jinnah supermarket in Islamabad, they are making millions of rupees as profits. I'm not talking of the sales or the revenues, but they're not paying taxes, which is a very large subsector which can contribute to the national income and reduce the burden on industry and the manufacturing. Similarly, if you look at the sales tax, which is also on imports and manufacturing and is passed on to the consumers, the effective tax rate, although you will say, oh, sales tax rate is 16%, 17%, in some places it's 21%. The effective sales tax rate is 3.63%. That means there's a huge gap between the nominal and the effective tax rate, and this is because of the flying invoices which are created by fictitious companies operating with bogus identities. And that's the leakage which is taking place in the sales tax also. Another objective of the sound tax policy is that the incidence of taxation should be equitable and fall in proportion to the ability to pay. As the incomes in the highest income brackets are higher, then they should pay a larger proportion of their income as the taxes. Now, look in the situation in Pakistan. This principle of tax policy is not observed because 2/3 of our taxation is all indirect, which is more regressive. And therefore, its burden falls on the lower income groups and the middle income groups. And therefore, we have a problem that the policy of the tax in order to have equity is not being observed. So we have a distortion as far as the sectoral incidence is concerned, and we have an equity problem. And because the emphasis to the tax authorities is to meet their revenue targets, this is how they are measured for their performance, you have to impose additional taxes, levies on existing taxpayers. Sometimes it is in the form of super tax, sometimes it is in the form of regulatory duties, sometimes you increase the rates. And this is a disincentive, again, which leads to the finding various loopholes in the complex tax code saddled with enormous discretionary powers and regulations to understate incomes, claim exemptions, and avoid full paying taxes. That means the simpler is the tax code and transparent is the way the tax is levied, these discretionary powers will be minimized and the leakages will be plugged in. I'm sorry to say that between the tax practitioners and the tax collectors, there are only two groups who understand what is contained in the tax code. Nobody else knows what it is in there. And therefore, the interpretation of the tax code is quite complex. And if you get into the litigation, first to the appellate tribunals, then to the courts, you may just go on and on. evading your taxes. So this is one of the reasons why it is in the interest of FBR. Untold 100 billion of dues are stuck because of the litigation in the courts. Now if you can simplify the tax code and reduce the system of the appeals to only a few, then FBR can recover this 100 billion which is past and which is going to accumulate over time because of this very, very complex tax code. Now, so the analysis shows from the economic point of view that the present taxation system is highly skewed towards the urban, industry and formal sectors, is narrow, it's inequitable, it's regressive, and it has created distortions, giving enormous discretionary powers to the tax collectors. And unless there is a structural transformation which takes place, one that expands the formal sector, makes the rural sector and agriculture more efficient, raises middle class numbers, makes taxes more progressive and less patronage ridden, attempts to reform the tax regime will continue to produce unimpressive. So what is the way forward? As I said, the estimates are that Pakistan's tax capacity is 22% of GDP, while the actual collection is only 11%. So you have a gap that you can increase it by almost 100%. One of the reasons for this wide gulf between capacity and actual collection is the high rates of sales tax and income tax. If those taxable individuals and businesses could be brought under the tax regime, which I have pointed out to you earlier, I can assure you that the sales tax rates and corporate rates can be brought down to provide incentive to the private sector for expansion and new investment, and FBR would earn more revenues by reducing the tax rates. We did this in 2005 by reducing the custom duties, and our revenues from customs actually went up rather than went down. So there is a lot of merit in having tax rates which are lower, which do not create a disincentive for the industry to invest, and they earn the money, but they know I'm paying 15% or 16% of my income tax. That's bearable. The price which they pay is also equal to 10 to 15%. So if the marginal cost of the bribes is equal to the marginal cost of paying taxes, any rational human being will opt for paying taxes, and therefore your revenues will go up. Now, the existing database of NADRA, which has identified the potential taxpayers, should be the starting point to bring them into the net. But how can this be achieved? And I'm not talking of this word political will, because this is misused. There are some problems which we have to take care of in order to expand this net. Number one, the tax code, as I said, has to be simplified. Tax administration has to be made hassle and corruption free. Number three, the audit has to be strengthened and improved, and if possible, by third party rather than the officials of the FBR. Fourth, that tax facilitation should be taxpayer centric an alternate dispute resolution, which was practiced successfully at one time by the FBR, and it took away a lot of litigation, should be once again revived and put in place. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not only the FBR. We have provincial governments which are also collecting taxes of various kinds, particularly the GST on services, which is now a major source of income for Punjab and Sindh. But they are totally ignoring agricultural income tax, the irrigation water user charges, and urban immovable property. When I was in the finance department of Sindh government in early 1970s, our collection from the water charges used to be equal to the entire operation and maintenance cost of the irrigation system. Today, in the Sindh government, only 10% of the operation maintenance costs are recovered from the water charges. 90% is a subsidy to these large farmers who are neither paying any agricultural income tax, getting scarce water and not paying for it, and they are misusing it. The inefficiency and the leakages in the water system in Pakistan are 50%, and it's a scarce commodity, and we are misallocating and misusing it. Similarly, if you look at the urban immovable property, FBR had done a good job by getting away from this stupid DC rate, because that encourages a lot of diversion of the money into the black money. What you have to do is to bring them up to the market values. You may reduce the tax rate, but I have calculated that only Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad together would be able to generate 1% of GDP as additional taxes by these measures of the provincial government. So if FBR can generate 1% additional by the measures which I have told you, and the provincial government can generate another 1% of GDP, that means 2%. Let me give you the calculations in simple terms as to what the economic impact of this would be. These additional revenues at the current rate will be around 680 billion. Our fiscal deficit today, around 5% of GDP, is about 1680 billion. So first of all, this 680 billion will reduce your fiscal deficit to 1000 billion from 116. That means your deficit will be only 3% of GDP. When you have 3% of GDP, your borrowing requirements, either externally or from the banking system or from the state bank, will be reduced. And next year, you will save 100 billion rupees in your debt servicing cost, which 100 billion you can use for education, health, drinking water, roads, rural infrastructure. Look at the 2% of GDP I'm talking about. I'm not talking about very large numbers. And I showed you that the scope is almost 10% of GDP. I'm not taking even 10%. I'm just taking 2% by the measures which I have pointed out. How great our fiscal situation would look like. We don't have to go to the IMF then, all the time. We have gone there 12 times. It is real shame that Pakistan is a chronic borrower of the IMF. Why? Because we are not looking at our own house. So this is what I consider is the strategy. But people take FBR to a task. But I have to be very fair and honest. In a society where documentation is shunned, malpractices and manipulations are rampant, tax evasion is pervasive, the role of tax collector is not envious. Like all organizations, FBR is also full of officials who have joined the service with the main objective of making money for themselves. The complexity of tax codes, the enormous discretionary powers conferred upon the low paid salaried officials, the antiquated human resource policies that make no distinction between good performers and honest officers and corrupt and incompetent, and lack of real-time accountability are hindering the FBR from doing its job. If you don't have any distinction between the person who is really honestly and competently doing a job and they wait for the seniority to get promoted at their own time, why should anybody really bother about this? So what we need is that we should first of all have a real-time integrated data management system under Paral or third party, which provides all the information of all the taxes, and it should be connected with NADRA, with the banks, with the State Bank of Pakistan, with the provincial excise and taxation departments, with the provincial revenue departments, and that, I think, would give them the material for the audit of the tax returns. So there will be no subjectivity. So if I have got 2 children who are studying abroad, and I'm declaring my income as only 100,000 rupees, the tax auditor will confront me with this data, which is the real data, that how come you can afford to educate 2 of your children in the United States, paying such and such fees, and here you are showing your income as 100,000. So there's no discretionary power of the tax collector, and the audit itself will flag based on the database as to where the understatement of income has taken place. So your tax capacity will therefore be enhanced. Similarly, on the customs side, the lower is the tax rate of the custom duties, the temptation for over and under invoicing, misclassification, clearance of goods at lower values, and non-verification of tax returns would also slide. Because, as I said, if they have to bribe people, which is equal to the tax they are paying, then they will be able to pay taxes and be decent citizens. Nobody really wants to be known as a black marketeer or a tax evader, because sometimes they may be caught. Now, my problem arises on the financial resources at the disposal of the FBR. They are totally inadequate in relation to the task which has been assigned to them. In my view, FBR should be given financial autonomy, and at least 1% of the total tax collection should be given to them as single item, line item, for running their operations. Why do I say that? Then they can allocate resources for carrying out surveys of the new taxpayers, assessments, facilitation, mobility of the tax collectors, inspections, investigations, intelligence gathering, enforcing compliance, hiring auditors, enforcement, and technology upgradation. This is what will make FBR a very efficient organization. At the same time, the salaries and the bonuses and annual increments of the officials working in the FBR should be decoupled with the national pay scale, and they should be given higher salaries, not on a single criterion, which is revenue collection, but on multiple criterion, how many new taxpayers they have actually brought under the tax net, how much facilitation they have done, how much audit success they have done, what is the compliance rate. And a new salary structure should be designed for all tax collecting agencies, both at the federal and the provincial levels. As a quid pro quo, their human resource policies should also be overhauled. They should be taken out of the efficiency and discipline rules of the Civil Service Act, which actually carries on the disciplinary proceedings for all ages to come unless you go to the Supreme Court, and they cannot take any action against those who are corrupt or incompetent. So that efficiency and discipline rules for customs, income tax, sales tax should be completely different from the Civil Servants Act. And their performance management system should not be annual confidential report, but each officer should be given objectives and goals which are quantifiable, measurable, and verifiable, and they should be asked to meet those goals. At the end of the year, the officer and the supervisor sits down and assess whether those goals have been met or not. And those who have excelled, they will be given higher increments and bonuses as compared to those who have failed. And this is not something very new. I have done this in State Bank of Pakistan, and with grace of Allah Almighty, it is working for the last 15 years quite successfully. And I introduced this in IBA Karachi, which is an educational institution for the faculty members who are very difficult to manage, and this system works. Only 20% get excellent or outstanding, 60% get satisfactory or average, and 20% get below average. And after 3 years, if they are not performing well, they will be out. Unless you introduce these human resource policies, I do not think FBR would ever be able to do what I have suggested. So let's not just be critical of only the tax collecting agencies, but you have to play a role as far as your obligations are concerned. And in other Allied Bank seminars, I have been emphasizing the point that family businesses are very efficient compared to the non-family businesses, because the decision making is quick, timely, and long term. You're not really looking at rupees and pesos for the short term. But because they remain family businesses, they do not expect, because you have limited capital. But if you become a corporate entity and you are family owned, your equity may be diluted, but you will have a larger capital. And your profits on that larger capital would be at least 5 to 10 times more than what you're getting now. So by cooking the books, by cheating the tax collectors, by understating your sales, by not disclosing all your incomes, you are actually doing a great disservice to you. I have been approached by private equity funds in Pakistan and outside Pakistan and they say, we want to invest in Pakistani companies. Tell us, which are the companies which are above board? Because in India, every year $16 billion are invested in the family businesses which have turned into the corporate entities. Although your equity is down, but you still have the control of the management. And control of management leads to a good decision making, which helps the health of the firm, but at the same time, your own contribution is lower, but you have recourse to a very large, capital base. And that's why India is doing extremely well. Everybody from KKR to Carlyle to every big private equity fund from the world is chasing the Indian businesses because they are family businesses like yours. So the younger generation of the family businesses who are being educated abroad or who have the exposure are my hope that they will not follow the footsteps of their parents and their uncles and their relatives, but transform themselves into corporate sector. And you will see that Pakistan, despite your paying taxes and the taxes going up, the economy will grow very fast and employment will be generated, and this will lead to both political stability and social stability, because if you have large unemployment, they will either become fundamentalists or extremists, or they will become criminals. So it is your responsibility. 90% of the economy is in the hands of the private sector. Government has only 10%. So what you do will lead to higher growth, and higher growth will lead to job creation and absorption of your labor. So while I'm asking for simplification and reduction in the tax incidence, I'm also requesting you in the business community to play your role by coming to invest, expand, and become a corporate entity. And I can assure you that you will be better off and Pakistan will be better off. Thank you very much.
That's all for a very enlightening keynote speech on the topic. Now I would like to, moving forward, request Mr. Khwaja Tanveer, Member Inland Revenue, to say a few words on the caption topic and share his thoughts. He is representing Chairman FBR, Mr. Khwaja Tanveer. Member FBR.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, I'm here because Chairman is not here. Dr. Saab, he knows FBR inside out. He's the one we have been taking advice when he was the governor. The reforms he brought in, at that point in time I was also involved in FBR reforms, and I had the privilege of discussing things. He has always been very kind, and saying anything contrary to what he has just stated. In fact, a part of the speech I just missed, I was late, but the part which I think, the way forward part which I heard, there cannot be disagreement on that. The way forward is definitely, you see, what I would say, it's a challenge, because I have been involved in FBR reform off and on. And if I just mention you the brief history of FBR reform, which is 35 years I have been there going through, there have been reports after reports, starting with I think Mr. Islam's report in 1985. That was probably when I just started my career, and I was briefly involved because Dr. Hafiz Pasha, being my teacher, he was also there. So I happened to get some information on understanding how these commissions work and what do they do. And being the youngest assistant collector at that time, I was given the privilege to be the part of the reform process. And thereafter, then in 90s, we had the similar attempts which were carried out again and again. I think 93, Senator Mazhar, he was in charge of a reform committee, and thereafter Dr. Hafiz Pasha, he contributed to the reform process of the FBR. And the latest which started with the government of the President Musharraf. At that time he was chief executive, and this was the World Bank Shahid Hussain task force which was created, and a report was given to the FBR for implementation. And this was I think July 2002 or 1, this was the year, and FBR was asked that you implement that report. And I was called from Karachi, and this is where I started actively participating, and I spent almost 10 years plus there in the FBR with a lot of desire to reform. And because I had done my MBA from the Oxford, and that was a very recent phenomena at that time, so I was asked that you join, and I wanted to really contribute in the reform process. So when I went through the report, very well written, definitely all those ills which are there today were very ably mentioned. Adversely a relationship between taxpayer and tax collector, corruption, and simplification is required. There should be restructuring of the FBR. There should be all those things which you can think on earth, because you get into the FBR for a month or 2 or 3 months, and you will start talking. And if you are outsider, then you will have a lot of understanding that everything is bad with FBR. But FBR still collects. And I also had this feeling even at that time that we should do something about this, and whatever I can contribute. So what we did, and Doxa was also in the vicinity, the state bank governor, I think has just come from the World Bank. My first proposal at that time was that, you see, there are reports after reports. You just open up the cupboard in the FBR and you will find all types of commissions and committees and their reports. And they have never worked. So this time around, let's do what we really want to do. So we had the expertise available from the donor agencies. The World Bank came forward, and we thought that we will have our own reform agenda instead of going for the task force report, Shahid Hussain committee that should be implemented. So we collected all our senior and mid-level officers, the leaders which we thought would be contributing in the reform process, and we held, and I desired that we should have an off-site seminar, because you see, like I was in a meeting and I was told that I should be here, and I'm here. So I told the then chairman, Mr. Riaz Malik, that if we really want to concentrate on the 2 or 3 days discussion as to what should be the reform agenda and how we should proceed, so we should not be in the vicinity of the FBR. And he said, then where do you want to hold? And I said, let's go to Bourbon, and we should be there. And the first response was, you don't want to work in the reform, so you want a non-starter. कल इतनी बड़ी headline लगी होगी कि गुलछड़े उड़ा रहे हैं टैक्स वाले, PC Hotel Bourbon में. And I was surprised and I said, if this is the way forward to think about the reform process, if we cannot even go and hold a seminar in a hotel offsite and we'll be working once we are there, then I don't think we should be getting into this. So जैसे ये report implement करें, तो luckily we had the finance minister at that point in time. He said, "I'll just put up a note and I will get the approval." So chairman had to take approval from the finance minister कि ये करना है, और उधर से भी यही हुआ कि ये वहाँ करेंगे क्या, खैर बार. So we had that, and I remember it was 27th of October, and this was soon after the 9/11 was, soon after 9/11 we decided to go there and have the, before 9 or somehow, thereafter soon there was 9/11 and we got into a rush of funding coming from everywhere. Pakistan had no issues, because before that there was IMF meeting and it was डांट डपट हुई थी काफ़ी एफबीआर की कि ये कंडीशनैलिटी पूरी नहीं हुई, ये नहीं हुई, एंड आई वाज देयर. So sir, we had the seminar. It was actually very well guided by from somebody who was from Pakistan working for the World Bank and who had been doing that job. So we had diagnostics of what is wrong and what we should be doing. And thereafter we developed a 8-10 page that is still in my computer. I was trying to take out that probably at that time what we wanted to do, and this is what at that move, the administration of the FBR senior. And if I can get you a print out, what Dr. Saab is just saying, this was what was stated in that paper, which came out of the seminar. That's, I will give it as an evidence if somebody wants. It's there in my inbox somewhere. And I felt very happy because this is the way forward. Hearing today Dr. Saab after 15 years or 18 years and now getting into a retirement mode, I was thinking what went wrong, why we couldn't do it, why all what we really know is not happening. The first meeting the Prime Minister, Mr. Shaikh Nabasi, called was about tax reforms. And we went there and we had the latest report of, again, a reform commission which was created, and we have one of the members sitting here, Mr. Kola. He was there also in that meeting, and we went fully prepared, and we stated more or less all these things: simplification, one-page tax return, the return which should actually anybody can file, and the one who gets selected should be giving a detailed return, and lower rates of taxation. There should be actually more facilitation, no contact between the taxpayer and tax collector. Writing something we wrote in 18 years ago, it was very simple because we were given little time to come for that, and sat down and we prepared and went off very well, and we got the approval again. Then go ahead and we'll have another meeting. And it's again, definitely we are going to be shortly meeting. You see, FBR, when it comes to, and now I'm in charge of implementing all the taxes, which is sales tax, income tax and federal excise. All is not well on the other side also. There is nothing well on this side, I would say, but all is not well on the other side. And if you see the return data, and this is available in FBR, you'll find that those who have the capacity to pay, we are always talking about broadening of the net, there are no two opinions about that. That there should be everybody should pay tax. I mean, those who have the ability, this is the basic principle. Adam Smith is starting with the tax administration and whatever the basic student has been the student of economics. There are no two opinions that tax has to be paid and it is to be collected. Even we go to the times of Islam and all that, people had to pay zakat and they had to be collected. There can be ways and means to get it, but people don't want to pay. Nobody wants to pay. This again, it's not unique for Pakistan. Particularly, it's not, I don't find it very difficult to understand because people don't see the advantages of paying tax. At least in the West, they do see. Here, we don't find the type of expenditures which are required because 80% or 90% of the budget is already committed, or now even after the federal government, after the NFC, I think they just start with something which is negative, paying the debt and the defense and public administration. They have nothing in terms of, so tax is definitely required. Why people don't want to pay tax? It's not, this is which I feel, it's not the simple tax system in Pakistan. It's not the problem. If you have gone through just 2 years ago, FBR introduced a scheme for the retailers, developed by the retailers. We gave a scheme in the budget. And thereafter there was hue and cry, shut it down. And immediately everybody in the government, they asked us, इनके साथ बैठे मुज़ाकरात करें, all markets, everywhere. It was a rush, majma. We thought that let them say what they want. And I tell you, those who are involved in those negotiations, you will find that they agreed to everything. Because we were being told that आपने कोई ऐसा काम गलत कर दिया है जिसपे, और we had not done anything wrong. We had just asked for some tax at retail stage because that is almost 16-17% of your GDP. As far as the tax, and they are not contributing 0.1% to the tax. So we said, okay, let's get out of this problem. And we had somebody who was a political person who had just joined the FBR, Mr. Harun Khan. He actually headed those negotiations, and he came out, he went to almost all the chambers all over the country. What happened? Today when you talk to Mr. Harun Khan, he came and he had a perception about FBR. And even yesterday evening when I was talking to him, he's a different person. He says, but FBR is doing what it can do. But people don't want to pay tax. And the problem becomes the political will. When Bangladesh introduced VAT, it was a complete VAT. You see, tax comes when there is a system. FBR introduced the Sales Tax Act in 1990. We moved from the excises. We were, I think, in this third world countries or middle income or low income countries, we were probably one of the few countries. We started looking into the tax code, and we had the Central Excise Act 1944. And it had a supervised system where on every factory there was an inspector, and some of those inspectors became factory owners later on, and the president of the Federation of Chamber Commerce also. And those my seniors at that time, they said, let's be modern and we should go for self-assessment, and this is how the world is, and we started looking into what the systems are. So sales tax was what you call value-added tax. So we started with the new code in 1990. It was written after a lot of discussion and efforts. Later on, because of the IMF program, it got more brushed up, cleaned, and in 1996, one of the best officers we had at that time was made member sales tax, Mr. Yaz Malik, and he actually had a lot of energy, and we went for the value-added tax. Within months, we could not do it because the retailers, there was agitation, and retail sector को छोड़ दिया, छूट गया, system collapse. फिर कोई आया, टेक्सटाइल वाले को ये इशू है, उनको ये मसला हो जाता है, इनका रेट यूँ कर दें. Because you cannot have a simple system with 6 rates or 5 rates or 4 rates, one rate. VAT का basic principle है कि जितने आप रेट ज़्यादा करेंगे उतना कॉम्प्लेक्स होगा, because it's an input and output, and if you have 8-10 rates, then you will have 10 inputs and 18 outputs, and coming out of it will be a figure which no computer system will be able to understand. It doesn't happen that way. एक का कुछ रेट आया, एक की कुछ एग्जम्पशन आना शुरू हुई. FBR is not a policy making organization, it is a policy implementation. It supports the policy. Policy comes from the ministry, policy should be with the ministry. It started like that. We were asked by Bangladesh to help us develop their VAT system, and one of our junior officers went there and they developed. And you know what happened? There was a strike. 23 days retailers strike. Al-Ghazia was Prime Minister. On 23rd day, in the evening, all of them opened up the shops. And they had a value-added tax with complete system till the retail. So you developed a system, you implemented it. 23 days, ठीक है करते रहे. System came. Now you know what happens? You have a system which has been adopted by 168 countries. You don't have to develop an IT system for that. You go and buy it off the shelf. You customize it in just 3 months and you start implementing. ठीक, automate हो गया. Form दुनिया भर में उस system के there are those forms are very straightforward, already available. Tax codes are there. How you have to move. What should be the input-output ratios, how it should be. And those who come after they're doing their chartered accountancy from the West, they also understand that this is how it works. So the system became very good for them. One of our officers went to Mauritius, who was here with me, my member at that time. And he is there since last 11 years, and he actually almost their tax system is, they cannot run the system without him. He is there. He is now permanent resident of the Mauritian. Government gave him the nationality, and Mr. M.S. Lal, and he is there. He is enjoying the status of the finance minister. Because, and he was one of the officers at that time who wanted to be in the reform, and the government didn't give him extension in service, and he had open offer, he went there, and since 2005 he is there. So the thing is, it's not rocket science. Dr. Sahab has mentioned the right thing. We actually, in our own reform booklet, which we prepared, we said let's not have the efficiency and disciplinary rules which are for the government servants. We offered, we didn't ask for the market salaries. We said, give us living wage. Give us living wage. And yet I know some of my friends, one of my friends in the Karachi University, who was senior, who attempted 3 times to qualify for the CSS, he failed, and then later on, when I was grade 19 or 20 officer, he was the country director of the Standard Charter with 3 Mercedes standing in his residence. It's not that I missed the bus because I chose a path which was there, and the thing is, we asked for living wage. I remember when we asked 100% allowance should be given, because 16,000 was the salary, 9,000 was the salary at that time for an assistant collector who qualifies the CSS, goes through the 2 years training, and I went with the proposal to the finance. And one of my, who was consultant there, not the civil servant, who was given, because at that time there were 55 consultants with the ministry. So he was supervising that meeting. उसने मुझे कहा कि अगर हम आपको बेसिक सैलरी का 4,000, मैंने कहा कि 100% नॉट द पर्क्स बट बेसिक सैलरी डबल कर दें, तो उन्होंने कहा 4,000 मोल हो जाएगी, तो आपने कहा करप्शन खत्म हो जाएगी। दिस वॉज द आंसर गिवन टू मी। तो मैंने कहा कि जी, तो मैंने उनसे कहा सर 9,000 में बजट बना दें मुझे। अगर कोई आदमी जिसे आप एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि सुबह टाई लगा के आए और आप बैठे हैं, नॉट जस्टिफाइंग करप्शन, और वो जो है 16-18 साल की एजुकेशन उसने की हो, क्वालिफाई किया हो, ट्रेनिंग की हो, यू टेल मी। ही सेड कि मैंने कहा इफ समबडी, वी आर नॉट आस्किंग फॉर whom, just living wage, and how do you expect a civil servant के जो दिन में जब साइन करे तो he has the authority to exempt 1 billion rupees, but you cannot spare him for him 4,000 rupees. And if this is what is reform, then I am out of it. I don't feel very proud that I am a part of a system. If somebody wants to live honestly, why don't you want to give him this opportunity to that? And this is how the story goes with the FBR reforms. Dr. Nikar, you should have 1% of whatever you collect. 0.49 was the cost of collection at that time. And after making huge efforts for 20 years, today we have 0.69. If we want to go and, because it's a territorial jurisdiction, I was Director General Intelligence recently. I asked my people, I went to Apara market, which is a relative sasti market mein, Jumega या Friday Sunday का सौदा खरीदने, and I saw people buying this Palwan Riodi, a lot of from Chakwal and huge. I said, what tax they pay, and they are not paying any tax. I'm sorry, I should not be using the word, but it should be off the record because the tax, there was hardly any tax. And I asked my people, the intelligence, to go and just find out what they are doing, and there was no vehicle available. They went there, जो भी होते हैं वहाँ पे हमारे लोग यहाँ से दिल्ली से गए बस में बैठ, and they found that probably no tax was being paid. जो ledger देखे, and they wanted to bring some of the ledgers, and they had no, because it was an official record, so it has got to be in official vehicle. And I have that picture which they gave me on WhatsApp, that sir, this is what we have hired, tutti frutti Suzuki rickshaw type car. Can we bring the record in this? I said, bring it. So this is where we are. FBR is a national institution, it requires reform. We are there for reform. FBR will, if you ask the FBR, the desire to get into the reform is so much that we are always in the reform. Being asked by the IMF when we are in conditionalities, we have to take 400 million from the World Bank, FBR reform becomes a conditionality, we are again in reform. We want to new government, we are in reform. So we don't mind. Actually, we have been acclimatized. And if you ask me to talk on reform, probably you make me stand here and I will continue till midnight. What should be done with the FBR? How it can be reformed? So all that is very much there. You are welcome to make recommendation. We will take it very seriously. I have written all the recommendations which Dr. Saab has given. Actually, these are some of the new things which he has mentioned. We are going to have a discussion with him. I will myself go and meet him and have some elaboration on that. And there is no way, because we are part of the Pakistan needs tax money. We are there. We need your support. We are there to collect. If we can't collect it, we are willing to surrender, and you bring anybody. We will be more than happy to give that opportunity to somebody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalsa, for encouraging perspective from the FBR side and your positive approach towards the seminar is we want to acknowledge that. And I think there is a lot of positive. I took a lot of positives from your speech, and a lot can happen. And now moving forward, I want to do a question and answer session with Dr. Ishrat. So before we do that, I just want to do a quick few words from Mr. Ashfaq Tola. He is chairman of the tax committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan, and he's also actively participating from the Institute tax reform. So I would request him to say a few words before we move on to the question and answer session. Thank you.
Our living legend, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, Tahir Qureshi Sahab, Khwaja Tanveer Sahab, senior management of Allied Bank of Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. As far as tax reforms are concerned, we at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan, now we have formed 7 tax reform task forces to assist FBR and to create tax awareness programs in the country. We welcome Allied Bank and other corporate sector. We have also approached World Bank, we have approached Oxfam for their help and assistance in developing this program, and we have also discussed with the FBR and many of the institutions to help us in creating awareness and tax awareness programs, especially in Pakistan. In this regard, ICAP has established 6 committees. We have got a direct tax committee, we have got an indirect tax committee, we have got a non-resident taxation committee, we have got an AML and Benami law committee, we have got a committee on VAT on GCC. And above all, as rightly mentioned by Tahir Sahab, that there are so many taxes, especially at the provincial level. We have got a glut of taxes and they are creating a disharmony. So in order to harmonize that, at ICAP level, we are soon arranging a roundtable conference of all the finance ministers and all the chairmen of the revenue authorities on harmonization of tax code, especially the provincial income capital. So I think we are duty bound, being an FX accounting body in the country. It is our duty to create tax awareness, and we are cognizant of it. It was basically.
Thank you, Ashfaq sir. I believe President Ahmad Chamber of Commerce is here as well, Mr. Amir P. Mr. Amir, I think a perspective from the business community is also important. If you can say a few words before we move to the question and answer session. Thank you very much, Mr.
थैंक यू जी। मैं सबसे पहले तो लाइट बैंक की मैनेजमेंट का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ, उनके सारी टीम का, कहता हूँ इन्होंने इतना अच्छा एक कंडक्ट किया है। मैं इसको कुछ सबसे पहले तो मैं कहूँगा कि हमें टैक्स जो है, जो लोग टैक्स दे रहे हैं, सबसे पहले तो उन पे बात करते हैं कि जो बंदा टैक्स देता है कि वो उसको हमने सिस्टम इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड किया होता है कि वो टैक्स देता है, वो फिर एक मिसाल बन जाता है कि ये टैक्स दे रहा है और ये फंस रहा है। तो ये हमें जो टैक्स दे रहा है उसको हमें आसानियाँ पैदा करनी है। वो उसको कोई नोटिस आता है तो सबसे पहला तो वो जो नोटिस होता है उसमें ये होता है कि वो है ही चोर, वो है ही डाकू। तो उसको इसको तरीकाकार चेंज करने की जरूरत है। जो टैक्स दे रहा है ऑलरेडी वो देखिए नेट में आ चुका है, उसको वो अगर वो गलती भी करता है उसको आसानी पैदा करनी चाहिए। उसको यानी कि उसका अगर टैक्स 10,000 में टैक्स बनता है तो उसको 1 लाख रुपए उसको जुर्माना लग जाता है। तो अब वो जो टैक्स बंदा टैक्स नहीं दे रहा, वो कहता है मैं टैक्स नहीं दे रहा, मैं तो ठीक है, मैं तो पुरसुकून हूँ।
डेफिनेटली यही हमारी आज की थीम है कि जितना टैक्स सिस्टम आसान होगा उतना ही टैक्स सिस्टम में ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग आएंगे। मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा ऑनरेबल डॉक्टर इशरत साहब को, इफ यू कैन जॉइन अस फॉर अ क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर सेशन।
My
My name is Mohammad Yusuf Khan. I am Chief Executive and Yusuf & Co. Cost and Management Accountants. First of all, I would like to appreciate Allied Bank and then all the organizers for organizing this august session. डॉक्टर साहब की मौजूदगी में फ़ायदा उठाते हुए और टैक्स रिफॉर्म कमेटी की जो मौजूदगी से फ़ायदा उठाते हुए मैं ये क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहूँगा कि बिकॉज वी आर टारगेटिंग सिंपलर टैक्स सिस्टम, तो पाकिस्तान में पहले FBR एक अथॉरिटी थी जो सेल टैक्स और इनकम टैक्स कलेक्ट करी थी। अब हमारे पास सिंस 2013 4 और प्रोविंशियल अथॉरिटीज आ चुकी हैं जो कि अपना इंडिपेंडेंट टैक्स सिस्टम चला रहे हैं। तो और अब जो ना अभी तक ये इशू आ रहा है कि हम आपस में इंटीग्रेट नहीं कर पाए। तो क्रॉस एडजस्टमेंट्स हैं प्रोविंशियल की फेडरल के साथ और कंज्यूमर्स आर एट प्रॉब्लम, टैक्स पेयर आर एट प्रॉब्लम। और रिक्वेस्ट कि ये डिसाइड भी हो चुका है कि FBR or all the 4 provincial authorities have decided to come up for the adjustment and single return where all the adjustments are enabled, but no single meeting has been done on this committee. I would like to request FBR officials and tax reform committee officials in the presence of Dr. Ishaq Saab to please narrate on this, but when it will happen. Thank you.
इसका आंसर तो मैं ख्वाजा साहब आपको रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा बिकॉज इट पर्टेन्स टू जी माइक।
ये सही है कि सर्विसेज का जो टैक्स है, सेल्स टैक्स, is being collected by all the 4 provinces now. There are issues of input adjustment. In fact, BR has been giving the facility to the tax departments to get the adjustment done from the single platform. They have adopted already the PRAL system, all the provincial governments. अभी बलूचिस्तान रिसेंटली आया है, उन्होंने भी और KPK में there is regular meeting every month on these issues. Last meeting which I chaired, actually we offered to all the provinces कि आप ये जो बात कर रहे हैं सिंगल प्लेटफॉर्म पे आ जाए, and which everybody agreed, and I think in next month or 2 probably, because we are there to offer, even we have offered to the Azad Jammu and Kashmir government, and we have not even asked them for any cost upfront or anything, because we know that this will help the system improvements. So yes, the issues are there, but I think once all of us are on the single platform, then the automatic input-output adjustment and the system itself, FBR is ready for that. Now the provincial governments, some of them are at the advanced stage, the others they have adopted some of those codes, and I believe ऐसा नहीं है कि people are ignorant on the nuances or it is on its way.
I think इसमें 2 बातों का ख्याल करना चाहिए। एक तो ये कि दुनिया भर में जब आप लोकल अथॉरिटीज को पावर देते हैं टैक्स कलेक्शन की, तो वहाँ टैक्स कलेक्शन बढ़ जाता है एज कम्पेयर टू सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी। ये एम्पिरिकल है, खाली ये बात नहीं है। और हमने भी देखा है कि जब से सिंध और पंजाब की अथॉरिटीज बनी है, उनके GST सर्विसेज बढ़ गया है, क्योंकि FBR के पास बहुत बड़ा काम होता है, वो इतना उसको नहीं देता। So we have to consider the revenue yields which are coming in, but आजकल के ज़माने में टेक्नोलॉजी जो है that has become your slave, and you can have a system whereby FBR के जो input output coefficients हैं वो सारे लोग इस्तेमाल करें। FBR like a big brother should try to handhold these authorities and bring them into one platform, and I think this problem जो consumer को इस वक्त आ रहा है वो खत्म हो जाएगा। FBR में कुछ resentment मैंने देखा कि जी हमारे हाथ से ये पावर चली गई है। Let's forget about that. Don't be adversarial and try to reach out to them. And as you chaired the meeting very rightly, and you identified that let's get into the problem solving approach. India ने किया है, उनका आप सिस्टम देख सकते हैं, and try to get it. तो आपकी रेवेन्यू ये भी बढ़ेगी और कंज्यूमर को जो नुकसान हो रहा है इस वक्त वो भी खत्म हो जाएगा।
जी, next question. The lady in the front, please, mic.
My name is Nuzhat and I belong belong to International Islamic University, Islamabad. Sir, thank you very much for such a brainstorming session regarding simplifying the tax systems. मेरा सवाल या इनफैक्ट एक आपकी अटेंशन चाहिए पब्लिक सेक्टर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस पेपरा रूल्स के तहत दे आर बाउंड कि वो सेल्स टैक्स पे करें ऑल परचेजेस में। तो क्या ये नहीं है कि हम एक पॉकेट से पैसे निकालते हैं और दूसरी पॉकेट में डाल देते हैं, क्योंकि वो पब्लिक सेक्टर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आर सपोर्टेड बाय गवर्नमेंट ग्रांट्स, और फिर एफबीआर को जब वो टैक्स पे होता है तो वो भी वहाँ पे ही जाता है। मतलब उससे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस की ऑपरेशनल कॉस्ट भी बढ़ जाती है, उनको लोग भी रखने पड़ते हैं सारे सिस्टम को मैनेज करने के लिए। अब एक और सिचुएशन है कि आप सारे ई फाइल अपने रिटर्न्स फाइल करेंगे, इवन इस्लामिक यूनिवर्सिटी एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशंस भी अपने रिटर्न फाइल करेंगे तो उन्हें इनकम टैक्स एग्जामिशन सर्टिफिकेट्स मिलेंगे। उससे भी हमें टैक्स एक्सपर्ट्स की ज़रूरत पेश आ रही कि हम किस तरह फाइलिंग करें। मतलब सिंप्लीफाई होने के बजाय इट अपीयर्स कि थोड़ा सा कॉम्प्लेक्स हो गया है सिस्टम।
देखें, दुनिया भर में ओनरशिप के बेसिस पर टैक्स असेस नहीं होता है कि पब्लिक सेक्टर है इसलिए इसको नहीं देना चाहिए, प्राइवेट सेक्टर है ये नहीं। आपको ग्रांट बढ़ा दी नहीं चाहिए इस्लामिक यूनिवर्सिटी की टू द एक्सटेंट कि आपको सिर्फ टैक्स पे करना पड़ रहा है। दैट इज नीट अकाउंटिंग और रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी भी आपकी क्लियर हो जाती है। जहां तक जब भी कोई नई चीज इंट्रोड्यूस की जाती है तो उसमें टीदिंग प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं। एक दफा आपके फाइनेंस डिपार्टमेंट को पता चल जाएगा कि टैक्स कैसे फाइल करते हैं, वो फाइल करना शुरू कर देंगे। तो शुरू में आपको थोड़ी सी दिक्कत होगी, लेकिन आप ये ना सोचें कि क्योंकि पब्लिक सेक्टर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है इसलिए आपको एग्जेम्प्ट होना चाहिए। दैट इज नॉट द राइट अकाउंटिंग मेथड।
है उसको एटलीस्ट ख़त्म कर देना चाहिए या उसकी पावर्स को इन्हेंस कर देना चाहिए। एफबीआर की तरफ से एक एफबीआर का बंदा एफबीआर के डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर बैठ के एक फैसले कर रहा है, डिसीजन कर रहा है टैक्स पेयर के, तो टैक्स पेयर का जो कॉन्फिडेंस है इस फोरम के ऊपर वो बिल्कुल ख़त्म हो चुका है। जो
आपका सवाल बिल्कुल ठीक है। मैंने अपनी तकरीर में कहा था कि इस वक्त जो एपलेट सिस्टम है इट्स कम्परसम एंड इट इज अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट। So they have to completely revamp their appellate system, make it few tiers and remove the conflict of interest. अगर कल ख्वाजा साहब appellate commissioner है, he is to look to his bosses कि अगर मैंने कोई गलत काम कर दिया तो मेरी promotion नहीं हो सकेगी. So he will be bound by that particular compulsion. So he should not be in the department; it should be outside the department.
Tarsha, you would like to add something?
जी डॉक्टर साहब, वो जो मैं जितनी भी डिस्कशन हुई है उससे जो मैंने अभी एनालाइज किया है, इट्स आई थिंक डेटा इंटीग्रेशन पाकिस्तान लेवल पे बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया है। और जो स्टैटिस्टिक डिपार्टमेंट है हमारा, आई थिंक दैट शुड बी गिवन द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी टू इंटीग्रेट ऑल द इंटरप्रिटेशन एंड द सेंट्रल डेटाबेस। जिस किस्म की इनपुट सर कस्टम डिपार्टमेंट से आ रही हैं उसकी बेस पे आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की बेसिस के ऊपर ऑटोमेटिकली वी कैन हैंडल रिफंड्स, उसमें ह्यूमन रिसोर्स की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है। हर चीज़ जो है वो टेबुलेटेड है। आई थिंक आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस जो ग्लोबली रोल प्ले कर रहा है, तो ये हमारी जो रेवेन्यू अथॉरिटीज़ हैं इनको प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप्स के साथ जो ह्यूमन इंटरेक्शन है, उसकी जो ह्यूमन कैपेसिटी की डेवलपमेंट है, डेटा इंटीग्रेशन के लिए किसी भी प्राइवेट सेक्टर से, अगर आपको बैंकिंग सेक्टर से कोई सोल्यूशन के लिए हेल्प चाहिए या कोई आपको चार्टर्ड फंड से सोल्यूशन के लिए हेल्प चाहिए, वी आर ऑल देयर टू सपोर्ट यू। एट द एंड ऑफ द डे जी हमने कस्टमर को फैसिलिटेट कर रहे हैं जो रियल कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहे हैं इस कंट्री के लिए। मैं भी पब्लिक सर्वेंट हूँ, आप भी पब्लिक सर्वेंट है इन ऑल कैपेसिटीज, तो वी हैव टू प्ले अ रोल। और इसमें आई थिंक हमें एक पेज पे आने की जरूरत है। दूसरा सर, टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर के ऊपर बहुत सी रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग और रिस्केड्यूलिंग की बातें होती रहती हैं, उसमें आई वुड ड्रॉ योर अटेंशन। आपको मसला आपने सारी एरियाज को देखा है। पुराने लॉज में सर, टैक्स के लॉज में मल्टीप्लिकेशन ऑफ 6 यूनिट्स की क्लॉज होती है। आहिस्ता आहिस्ता हमने सारी जो रिहेबिलिटेशन से रिलेटेड 6 यूनिट्स की क्लॉज है वो रिमूव कर दिया ऑर्डिनेंस से। आई वुड आल्सो सबमिट की आपकी जो रिकमेंडेशन है उसमें जो रिहेबिलिटेशन की क्लॉज है उनको रीस्टोर किया जाए। चेक एंड बैलेंसेस हर जगह होने चाहिए, लेकिन ये है कि रीस्ट्रक्चरिंग फॉर द सेक ऑफ रीस्ट्रक्चरिंग फ्रॉम द फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन डज नॉट सर्व द पर्पस। जब तक सर उसके कैश में जिस तरह से हम बात कर रहे थे, तो कैश को उसी सूरत में इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं जब बाकी की इदारे जो है वो रोल प्ले करें।
So I would really submit that कि जो restructuring है उसके लिए rehabilitation खास तौर पर टेक्सटाइल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट से सर उसमें rehabilitation की बहुत सख्त जरूरत है।
आपके बात बिल्कुल सही है। मैंने एक बैंकिंग लॉज कमीशन बनाया था, उसमें फोरक्लोजर लॉ और बैंक्रप्सी लॉ दोनों को इंट्रोड्यूस किया था जैसे दुनिया में होता है। अब सुना है कि 15 साल के बाद उन्होंने कॉर्पोरेट रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग बिल बनाया है जिसमें ये सारी चीज़ें जो इंक्लूडेड है। मैंने देखा नहीं है कि उसकी क्या सिचुएशन है, बट इंडिया हैज़ कम अप विद ए वेरी प्रोग्रेसिव बैंक्रप्सी लॉ, उसको भी वो कॉर्पोरेट रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग कहते हैं शायद, और उसमें जो अच्छे फीचर्स हैं आई थिंक वी शुड ट्राई टू अडॉप्ट देम ताकि बैंकों का भी काम आसान हो जाए। आपको याद होगा कि हमने एक बनाया था CIRC, कॉर्पोरेट इंडस्ट्रियल रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग कॉर्पोरेशन, और कहा था कि इसके डिफॉल्टर्स के जितने एसेट्स हैं वो हम थर्ड पार्टी को ऑप्शन करेंगे, ओनर को हक नहीं होगा। आप लोग जो बैंकर्स हैं आपको पता होना चाहिए कि उस लॉ की वजह से बहुत सारे डिफॉल्टिंग पार्टीज अपने बैंकों के पास गई वापस, जिनकी पहले वो बात नहीं सुन रहे थे, और उन्होंने रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग की है बैंकों के साथ मिलके। बैंकों का कैश फ्लो ठीक हो गया, उनकी बुक्स ठीक हो गई, और वो कंपनियां जो हैं वो दोबारा चल रही हैं। तो वी नीड दैट काइंड ऑफ ए लॉ, बट आई एम आउट ऑफ टच कि कॉर्पोरेट रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग लॉ किस जगह पर है, कि सेनेट में है कि नेशनल असेंबली में है, बट आई थिंक वी नीड दैट।
थैंक यू वेरी मच। मैं तमाम ऑडियंस का बहुत ज़्यादा शुक्रिया अदा करूँगा। नाउ वी विल जस्ट डू अ क्विक शील्ड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेरेमनी एंड देन वील मूव टू द लंच। Tarzan, if you can join me on the stage. The first shield is for Dr. Sasam. Give the shields, and I would request Father Tanvir I would now request Mr. Ashfaq Tullah sir, Chairman, Fiscal Reforms Committee, Institute of Chartered Accountants. Chairman, SECP, first due to a certain important meeting, could not attend this meeting. Represent Kare, Imran Ahmed Saab, Additional Director, SECP. Let's take the shield on behalf of Chairman, SECP. The last sheet is for Taj sir.